While Cyclone Alfred has left us, the scars certainly remain along our coastline. 6 million cubic metres of sand have eroded from Gold Coast beaches. Mayor Tom Tate says he wants the beaches restored by Easter.
I want those iconic beaches to be well ready ahead of Easter to prove the point that the Gold Coast is ready for fun in the sun for your Easter holidays.
So work has already begun, starting at Main Beach and Narrow Neck. Residents and visitors will see more machinery on beaches in the days ahead. Earlier this week, the city began to transport sand from a sand stockpile to Higman Street Surfers Paradise. More than 190 loads have been transported so far. And to help with sand replenishment, the city is also working with a contractor to have a sand dredging barge begin work offshore as soon as possible. Angus Jackson is an engineer from International Coastal Management and joins you this morning. Hello, Angus.
Hi, how are you going?
Really well, thank you. Have you ever seen such damage along our beaches here at the Gold Coast before?
Much worse. This is a relatively, well, it's a big event, but it's certainly not the worst we've had.
Okay, when was the worst?
Well, there was the Great Cyclone of 54. That devastated our beaches and we lost houses. Then the 60s and 70s, we really copped it. 67 was the big event. We had 7 cyclonic back-to-back events, and that was huge. And that became the line in the sand where the council drew the A-line and said, we won't tolerate erosion any further landward than that in the future. But this event was well forward of the 67 line.
Okay. Tell us what actually happens to the sand during an event like this. Where does it actually go? How far off our coastline does it travel?
Okay, so the beaches are highly dynamic and complex beasts. In relatively fine weather like we've been having, there's still a lot of wave energy offshore, and that's dissipated by the surf zone. And we end up with healthy beaches and dunes, which council promotes through nourishment and dune stabilisation. When we get an event like this, we have about 50 times as much wave energy offshore, and a huge amount of that initially reaches the beach, scours into the beach and dunes, flattens the slope, widens the surf zone, which is where the energy is dissipated, and that sand eroded from the upper beach, the visible beach and the dunes, is taken by rips about half a kilometre offshore, and that deposits as a shallow storm bar, which nature being very clever, that ends up where the first storm waves break, and that helps dissipate the energy reaching the beach. So it's this constant flux of dynamic energy and beach slopes. So at the moment, our dunes are sitting about half a kilometre offshore. And I should add that 6 million cubic metre estimate was a quick one of mine straight after the event. I don't think there hasn't been any survey done yet, so we won't have the final numbers for a little while yet.
Okay, so that was a quick estimate, but has it changed in the last couple of days? If you had to estimate this morning, would you still be saying around 6 million cubic metres?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
So in a big event, let's put that into context, it'd probably be more like 10 to 15 million taken off the beach in a really big event.
Wow, okay. So now we're talking about restoration. How do we go about returning our beaches to normal? We know that there is a Danish sand dredging barge coming to the Gold Coast. What do you know about this vessel and what it will be doing?
I know council's talking to various dredging companies. The nice thing is that on the Gold Coast, it's not a case of finding a dredge, it's finding which dredge. There's a Danish dredge that regularly works on the Tweed Bar, so it's local. There's also another couple of local dredge companies that can and have done beach restoration work in the past. So, dredging's certainly part of the toolbox that council has. But you asked me, what it's like, what they do already. And I'm impressed. It's a slick machine. Council's already been in and restoring the major beaches, Surfers Paradise, Broadbeach, etc., where the main flags are, getting those back in business. And I predicted by next week, given no more events, that the visible beach in front of the dunes, Scarp, would be starting to recover very quickly, and we'd have our flags back up. Council's ahead of that schedule. Already the beaches starting to look very usable.
Okay. Angus Jackson is your guest this morning, an engineer from International Coastal Management. We are talking about the restoration of our beaches, the remediation of our beaches here on the Gold Coast. Tell us about how these sand dredging barges actually work. They don't actually take the sand from the ocean and dump it on the shore. They just move it back into the surf zone. Is that right? Can you just explain how that works for us?
Yes. So when we were doing, goes back to the 1980s, where we had no beaches down the southern end of the Gold Coast. We just had boulder wall. We needed to nourish those beaches very quickly. Now, we were doing research on those storm bars, exactly what I described to you about the storm bars moved back on shore after the storm event, because the energy drops, those bars move quickly on shore. We quickly recognised that if we created artificial storm bars with a dredge, because there's a lot of sand offshore from old beaches before the present sea level where they are, and good beach sand, we didn't need to bring the sand in with the dredge and then pump it through a pipeline on the beach, which is not really expensive. We could just create artificial storm bars, and nature would do the rest within 6 to 12 months, so at about half the cost. So what we've seen, 2017 was the last big nearshore nourishment, and that's what we call it, nearshore nourishment, event on the Gold Coast. I think it was, 3 million cubic metres sand, might have been more. I should know, we were involved. There's been a lot of numbers in my head.
Yes, I bet.
So what they do is the dredge goes offshore, finds good patch of sand, which has all been surveyed, brings it in, and then if it's a really big dredge, like they used in 2017, they do what they rainbow it. So they get in as shallow as they can, and then they pump it into the air so it lands in the middle of the surf zone, and then the waves just bring it up the beach. So the good thing about that, and as I say, that was developed by Gold Coast City Council back in 1985 when I was in charge. It's used globally now. But what it means is that we don't have pipelines on the beach. Everything's happening in the surf zone. And in 2017, the sand was actually placed in the surf zone to improve the surfing. So it's a really nifty method.
Certainly sounds it. So it's, quite a neat effort, as you say. Can it be used to maybe, play around the edges with the surf break in terms of, really improving the surf areas that people, like to surf in? Obviously, we had a lot of international surfers who come here to the Gold Coast. It's internationally renowned. Can we use this opportunity to make that surf even better?
Definitely. And last time Griffith University was involved in monitoring the placement, we were involved in actually determining where the sand should be placed to optimise surfing and optimise the speed at which that sand would come on shore. Griffith University did a good long study on monitoring what the effect of that, and it was very positive. So the answer is yes. We can use that sand to improve the surfing. It's not a long term because the bars are mobile, but certainly for weeks afterwards, the surfing in that location is improved.
Okay. And how costly is an exercise like this in getting these sand dredging barges and repairing the beaches this way? How costly is it?
Okay. So the initial work that they're doing on land now with excavators battering down the dunes, very low cost, but very effective. So that's the initial response. Then the longer term response is to top up the sand reserve. So what was happening back in the early last century, the Gold Coast was basically developed too far seaward. And since then, 67, we've been pushing the beaches seaward. So the next one will just give another top up. So the next time we get a Category 2 event, the impact will be less. So since 67 and the first major nourishment works to push that beach seaward was 1974. Since then, every big event has had a lesser impact. So this new work that Council's proposing on the back of this will again increase the resilience of our beaches. And the work the Council's done is recognised worldwide, where our work with beach resilience is recognised by the UN, and we'll be presenting this as a case study, the 2025 storm event on the Gold Coast, to a United Nations conference in Nice in June. So, we're getting there.
I'm interested to know, are there any other sort of internationally recognised beaches where this has now been used, or maybe used recently, in terms of replenishing their beaches as well? Are there any beaches that we might know of where you can sort of give us an example of where this has worked really well?
A lot of work in America. The Americans have the nearshore nourishment. California, there's been a couple of recent cases, and we're working in California at Oceanside. Their brief to us was, we want beaches like the Gold Coast. And that's what we'll give them.
Fascinating. Well, really interesting to get your insights this morning, Angus. So thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us this morning. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Bye.
That is Angus Jackson, an engineer from International Coastal Management. So interesting to know that the experience here with Tropical Cyclone Alfred will certainly be observed from experts around the world, really, to see how we go about repairing our beaches, making them more resilient after this weather event. Certainly, other beach experts around the world watching on with great interest. 25 minutes past 9.